Awesome. Well, just to get us started, Emma, could you give us a little bit of background about yourself and your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Emma. I am the director of customer success at Guusto. I've been at Guusto for just under 4 years, turning 4 in November. So it's been quite a while with the team. Really saw Guusto grow over the past few years. And I'm really excited about where we're going in the future as well. I started at Guusto when the customer success department was less of a department, more of like a job. And it was a job that a lot of people did. Um, and so people just kind of pitching in. We had intercom at the time, so it was definitely the stage of customer success where it was still like, is this customer success or is it customer support? It was probably more of both at the time, and then gradually growing that to separate departments. And now we have a customer support team, a customer success team. We have playbooks for, starting from onboarding to all the way to renewals, and expansion. And so, yeah, it's been a process of building this out with the team.
That's awesome. I talked to a lot of startups who are kind of where you are, where you were, 4 years ago when you started, and they're kind of in that amorphous customer success, customer support world. How did you start thinking about how to tease those things apart?
I think that was always part of the plan, was to split those functions out. It was just a matter of how do we grow in a sustainable way without growth. We wanted to grow, but we didn't want to grow too fast because we are in the HR industry and we do care about culture and we want to protect our people. So one of the, challenges that we had to navigate is we want more people, but we can't grow too fast because we want to avoid the situation of then having to fire people. So we're kind of leaning more towards, let's get really efficient, let's stay lean instead of like bloating the team and then eventually be left with a scenario that we didn't want to be in.
I love
Yeah.
that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. So that was just the process. It was always kind of like the idea of like, we want these to be separate functions, but as the team grew, as we were able to add more headcount, we were able to finally, say, okay, these technical questions that came to me in my email, I'm going to really exercise my self-control and not respond, and then forward it to the support team. And so that was a transition that we all had to make.
I love that. So you mentioned thinking about how to be efficient with your customer success team. Like, what were the things that you were thinking about? If you can remember, like, what sort of efficiencies were you really thinking about? What were you trying to optimize for?
Yeah, I think I can draw from a recent example. So we are still kind of a lean team. We only have a few people on the customer success team. We have a slightly bigger in-house customer support team now, led by our wonderful Noah. And recently, a member of the CS team left to pursue new opportunities. We're very, very happy for her. But that also meant that I needed to figure this out and make sure that all our customers are taken care of. We still had enough people to onboard our customers. And the way that the CS team works at Guusto is we onboard people, we manage them, and we also renew them. So the whole end-to-end process. And so we had to really figure out how to be efficient with how do we set up the book of business, what makes financial sense. So working with our wonderful finance team to figure that out. And then what are the processes that we do now that is not scalable, that we were able to do with more people, but now with less? How do we still make sure that customers are onboarded and do everything else that we do? Luckily, we did also have a new member join the team. So it kind of balanced out, but with a new member joining, there is a phase of onboarding and then training the new members. So we kind of took advantage of this opportunity to learn to be really efficient. And through that process, we are still in the process of toning down our onboarding process. I think we went straight into like, how do we set the customer and ourselves up for success for that long-term relationship? But now we're realizing, okay, some of the smaller accounts that we're onboarding, we don't need to set up 4 calls with them to onboard them. We don't need to talk about like 1 year from now. Let's just get you started because that's ultimately what the customer wants to do too, is let's get our program launched ASAP.
So when you're thinking about like the different types of customers and how you onboard them, do you segment your customer base? And if so, like how do you think about segmentation?
Yeah, I think we do segment it. It's not a perfect science, I'll admit. I think we're still figuring that piece out, but it's just based on size. So how many seats do they have? And also we are the way that I guess the way that an account at Guusto works is you would fund the account and there's also the subscription piece. So it's not just the ARR based on subscription. We also need to factor in just the funds that come in. And so, yeah, so factoring both the subscription income and I guess the cash flow that comes in.
So thinking about how you right size your process, do you make much use of like automation or tooling to kind of help some of the systemization of how you work with your customers? And if so, like how do you think about, automation?
Yeah, we do use systems. We are trying to use it more. And so we use the tool set that we have is Intercom for our customer support, and we also use HubSpot. We don't actually have a dedicated CS platform yet. It's something that we've been working on. But through Intercom, we do have event triggers. So if a certain thing happens, then a certain email goes out. So to some degree, there are parts of the onboarding process where there are automated emails that go out to people. On the HubSpot side, we had to get, again, drawing back to the efficiency piece, we had to get really creative with the tools that we have in HubSpot. So with HubSpot, initially, we were using deals to track onboarding tickets. Eventually, we signed up for the Service Hub. I think they were just building it out, so we got a nice discount to use that service. And using the Service Hub, we then used the tickets to track onboarding. So we had to, get creative with the tools. And then certain emails can then be automated through the HubSpot deals, or now we use tickets. Actually, we use both, but yeah, we are leveraging some of these digital tools. I think we can use them more, but we are working with our engineering team to set up more event tracking so that we can send out emails or automations that actually matter to the client. Because the last thing I want to do is set up all these automations and emails that could go out that seem great to us, but then the customer receives that message and feels like it has nothing to do with them. I think that'd be the worst outcome than not having that email go out at all.
Totally. I think that's a very pragmatic approach. So when you're thinking about the triggers and the events and like the thing, like what qualifies the emails that you send out, do you look at like product usage? Are there certain things that or green light or red light in terms of how your customers use your product?
Yeah, so the ones that we know well are, when they take certain action in the account. So Guusto is an employee recognition platform. So there are gift cards that get sent to people. So we know when, for example, a gift is sent out, that might be a moment where we reach out to the client. Did they feel like there's value in the system? Or if somebody received a gift card and then, maybe they felt appreciated, that may also be a moment in the customer life cycle where we would reach out to. So there are certain moments that we know for sure. And then there are other ones that I think as our product evolves, we're still just making note of and wanting to add automation to, but also just observing and seeing like what is the right time.
Yeah, interesting. Do you spend much time thinking about putting tooling in place around churn? And is that something that is like a top of mind for you, or is that just kind of part of the broader scope of what you think about?
Oh, it absolutely is top of mind. Churn is maybe the number one thing that's on my mind these days, especially with everything going on with the economy. I mean, it doesn't just affect us, it affects our clients, which then ultimately affects us too. So thinking about churn in multiple ways. There is good churn. I do, I do believe in that. I think if it's not a good customer product fit, that churn is good. But ultimately, from the financial side, we have to be um, conscious of like how customer success as a department affects the business. There is so much income that we generate as a department, especially if we can keep the customer long term. And so, yeah, it's definitely top of mind.
So you said something interesting, customer product fit as it relates to churn. I think I know what you mean by that, but I'd love to hear kind of like how do you think about that? How do you make that diagnosis if there's been churn?
So we would know if the customer churned because we would track that. So and usually it's either an email, saying, we're ending this relationship, or it's a unsubscribe of some form. So and usually it's not a surprise, because our CSMs have been nurturing that relationship as much as they can, and they're not getting the response that they typically would for a healthy customer. So in most scenarios, we're not surprised by the churn because we've already known maybe months ahead of time that this customer was not a good fit. Maybe even post onboarding, we've known this is not a great fit. And then this customer has just been on, the struggle bus for months. And then leading up to the renewal, we just know, okay, this is going to be a challenging one. We do whatever we can to talk to the customer months ahead of time to see if there's any kind of roadblocks that we can remove, any solutions that we can implement for them to make sure that they stay. But ultimately, there are customers who decide that this isn't the right solution for them.
So kind of related to that, like how does your team work with your product team? Like how do you manage those communications? Like do you flow a lot of that feedback back to your product team?
Yeah, it's so important to get the customer feedback to our product team. So we use Asana. So we would document client feedback directly into Asana. They have a board, which is like a customer success board. Or product feedback. We also use Slack. It's really just whatever channel we can get the message across. We do that. We just want to not be the bottleneck of customer information and then share that with the rest of the team. So that's something that we continue to work on because sometimes you do get bogged down on the day-to-day activities. And then so once in a while, we remind the team, okay, share customer stories. And if there is feedback, share with the team. So also weaved into our customer touch points in our meeting agendas and the templates that our CSMs have, there are bullet points that specifically ask what is working well, what is not. And then we just make a habit to always share that with our product managers.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you make much use of like CSAT or NPS? Like, do you do much like customer surveying?
We do. The CSAT score we are tracking now for onboarding. So post onboarding, we are tracking the customer. We send out an automated survey essentially for the CSAT score. We also track the 90-day post launch. So 90 days after the program is launched, what is their NPS score? We also do like an annual, same time of the year, just generic NPS score that goes to everyone, just so that we have some sort of a benchmark year over year of how that number changes. So we have a few being measured. I know there's conversations in the industry on like whether or not NPS score is useful or not. I think to some people it is. And I think it's better than not having, by some people, I mean like, other stakeholders, whether it's your investors or your CEO or other people looking at Guusto, for example. And I think that having some sort of a number and grasp on how your customers are feeling is better than nothing.
I would totally agree. I think at least directionally it gives you some clues. Are there other metrics that you think about a lot, or like what are the metrics that matter for you and your team?
Ooh, metrics. We're actually in the process of redoing our metrics now. So I would say two main categories that we're close to nailing down. One is onboarding. So how much time does it take to onboard a client? One thing that we need to still figure out is we would, as a team, our customer success team, we would consider a client onboarded. So we would maybe mark that ticket as completed, but does the customer see their program as onboarded? You know what I mean? Like, do they think that this onboarding has completed? And does our sense of program is ready to launch align with the customer's sense of program ready to launch? So that's still something that we're figuring out. But how much time does it take to onboard a client? How many clients are being onboarded in a certain time frame? And really just trying to measure at least that time to value. When does the customer see value in our system, and metrics like that. On the renewal side, how many deals closed? What is the percentage? What is the deal value? So it's important to get that context. Maybe we're seeing, 90% of deals closed, but then we look at the total contract value and it's less than, last month, 60% closed. So it's important to get that type of context. We do in that scorecard have CSAT and NPS scores as well. And then between onboarding and renewal, though, that is something that we're still working on. So what is the customer health score? And without a CS platform, it's been a bit of a challenge trying to, conglomerate all the different inputs and put it into like one health score, but it's definitely on my mind.
Yeah, interesting. Out of curiosity, is your onboarding process somewhat involved?
I would say it's more involved. Yeah. Because we help HR leaders launch recognition programs at their organization. So it's not just for larger accounts, it's more involved. For smaller accounts, it could just be, let's help you set up your account, walk you through how to upload your team members, and do like a system technical training. What are the settings that might apply to your program? But for larger organizations, then we need to talk about change management. So in order for a program to be successful, maybe for onboarding, we don't have to talk about change management, but we see more success when we do talk about, okay, how does this actually roll out at your organization?
Yeah, interesting. So changing gears a little bit, I'm curious, do you feel that the way customer success is done there, or just in general, changed like significantly with everybody working remotely?
Do you mean at Guusto?
Yeah, I mean at Guusto, or if you saw even broader changes as well. I know you've been there long enough that you were there pre-COVID and currently. But just in general, like, do you feel like the way people do customer success is different now than, say, 2019?
I'm not sure. Because even when we were in office, it was still talking to people on Zoom. So that piece hasn't changed. But I guess where I can see a difference is the product team used to sit right next to me. So I could just turn around and talk to them. And the engineering team was a couple rows down. So, if there was something I didn't understand about how the product worked, I could just walk over and talk to them. So the biggest change for me, at least in my experience in this role, is just having to send somebody a Slack or set up a Zoom meeting, which makes it then feel very formal. And you feel like you have to come in there into the conversation with an agenda to respect their time. So that definitely is a bit of a change.
That's interesting. Do you find your team ask questions in Slack, like in public venues? Like, so if you were to ask a question, somebody else on your team gets the benefit of hearing the answer? Is it like mostly like asking somebody directly a question?
Oh, we encourage people to ask questions in the channels. Yeah, so we definitely, we have a customer success channel. We might just tag the product team there and ask the question, or we just post directly in the product channel. But yeah, we definitely are aware of the benefits of posting a question so that when there is an answer, everybody can see it and just use Slack almost like a database to search for things.
Yeah, that's cool. So like thinking about when you hire more people now, if you were to try to hire a customer success person today, what what sort of like traits or background, like what sort of things do you look out for to give you a clue that somebody may be really good at doing the job of customer success?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I would look for. So one, I think what makes you really good as a customer success manager is the ability to anticipate needs. So being able to think a few steps ahead of what the customer might need. And then also the listening skills. So the ability to hear the spoken and unspoken words. I think the unspoken part is really important, even though we can't necessarily read their body language over Zoom, but there are still ways that things are talked about where that you can infer things from. And being able to not just pick up on that, but also action on it and maybe make a comment on it so that the client knows that you have acknowledged them. Right. And so that the next time around, they might feel more comfortable speaking up and more directly about certain things. And then I think also having good people skills is really, really important for the customer success role, because we just talked about working with the product team, right? So like the ability to influence others, not just your customers, because sometimes we want to be the trusted advisor, right? So sometimes you need to give them suggestions. And we don't love telling customers, no, what you're doing is wrong, right? But sometimes that is the case. So you need to be able to influence your customers in a respectful way and make sure that they are able to pick up on your suggestions so that they ultimately can be more successful with the solution. And also working with your internal teams in a collaborative way and having good relationships with your colleagues so that if something comes up, because things come up in customer success, and if it comes up, you have someone to go to who can help you, right? And maybe they can just drop what they're doing and they can jump on whatever you need them to help you in that moment. And that really goes a long way, especially if it's something urgent that it needs an immediate resolution. So I would say those are the main things that I would look out for. And so also I recently just saw Anika Zubair, who hosts the Plan Hat podcast and customer success. She posted on LinkedIn, it was a snippet about being the customer success manager is being the CEO of your book of business. So definitely looking out for traits that demonstrate that this person can get things done. And take the initiative to find a solution to get things done. Because sometimes, nobody knows what the next step is, right? With the customer, like nobody knows what the perfect solution is. So you just have to talk to a bunch of people and then figure it out from there. And through that process, learn really quickly.
I love that. Do you when you have interviewed and hired customer success managers in the past, like, have you seen a theme in terms of role backgrounds that they've had previously? Is it all like my experience is customer success managers rarely start in customer success, that they frequently come from other roles. And I'm curious if you've seen like a pattern with the CSMs that you've worked with about like common backgrounds.
I actually find that people who have some sales experience, this might not be popular opinion in customer success, or maybe the industry has changed, but people who have some sales experience do really well in customer success. Not to say that, a CSM should be selling to the customer, but having that kind of sales acumen and knowing when to say things and knowing when to hold back, that type of training and intuition in a way, I think really helps in the customer success role.
I think that will be more popular than you imagine. I think the most common one that I've heard is sales background. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah. But the other one, though, not just sales, I think like people who have customer support experience can be really successful in the job as well, because you need to be, and especially if they're really good at customer support, because you need to be empathetic. You need to be able to take in criticism without taking it personally. And then not only take in that feedback, but also continue the conversation. You can't just walk away from that conversation, right? So I think having that type of training really makes you strong mentally. And that is a very important trait for a customer success manager.
So, you mentioned that your CS team kind of does it all. Like it sounds like everything post sale is in
Yeah.
your team's realm. So I'm assuming that includes like renewals, upsell, things like that. Is that correct?
Yep.
Uh, how do you think about that when you're bringing CSMs in who may not have that background of like getting the renewal, dealing with upsells and things like that? Is that something that you just kind of like look for pre-hire? Is it something that people kind of learn as they go? Do you have a program to help people understand the ways to think about that?
Yeah, well, upselling specifically, we what we do for that is we create what's called CS qualified leads. So that's something that we're still kind of experimenting with. And then we pass it on to our DCCs, so people on our sales team. And so we create the opportunities, but ultimately the selling, the contract conversations, they do go to the sales team, the people who are best equipped to have those conversations. But it is a very wide range of skills. And I do think it is harder to hire when we do manage the end to end. So the onboarding and managing the accounts and then renewals. It's a lot of different skill sets that you need. And with our team right now, I think we have very, very capable people on the team who are able to do this. And I feel very lucky that they are on my team. In the future, for the hiring, to be honest, Paul, I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to see the candidates and really try to do my best to evaluate.
I think that's the best, most honest possible answer, right? Like, especially with customer success, you just don't, I mean, you don't know how your org's going to work either. I feel like
Yeah.
that always changes. Do
You
you,
know what? One thing that I would add on to that is having your strong team members mentor the new ones. Because whatever good habits that really strong member has will get passed on to the new members on the team. And it creates that culture, right, of like how we do things. And so trusting that person to mentor others, I think is so far has been really successful.
that's awesome. Do you have a structured mentorship program, or is it just kind of a cultural, like the way you operate is mentorship driven?
No, I wouldn't say we have a structured mentorship program.
How big is your team?
We have 50 total, or just over 50 employees across Canada.
50 in customer success?
Oh no.
How long is your CS? How,
No,
how big is your CS team? Just out of curiosity.
yeah, we have two, aside from me, two full-time CSMs and then uh one other person who wears many hats. So CS ops, data analyst, and also a bit of technical. So he's the person who is the glue that keeps us all together. But we had we have two full-time CSMs. One of them is very new, and then also the customer support team manager also reports to me.
Got it. So you've got a pretty close knit team then.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Boy, the glue role on a glue team seems intense. I feel like CS in general is kind of like the duct tape role, right?
The
So
duct tape for the duct tape.
that's right. I love it. So Emma, this is my last question. It's always my favorite. Like thinking about the future, are there things that you sense are coming, see are coming, technology, process, really could be anything. Think something that you're excited about if you were to forecast 18 months, 24 months into the future?
Ooh, 18, 24 months. Well, something that we're already seeing is more of a digital approach. So using data and using AI to generate tailored content for people is something that we are already seeing. And I noticed that even some of the CS platforms out there, they have AI generated QBRs, which was really exciting. I'm a little bit skeptical about how accurate that information is exactly, but I love the idea of that existing, and it'll only get better from here. So that is definitely something I'm excited about. And the other one is, I feel like when we talk about customer success, it's usually in tech industries, but I think the customer success mindset is starting to, or already has been I guess growing outside of tech. So other businesses that are not in tech are starting to adopt this customer success ideology, where it's anticipating customer needs and proactively providing solutions to customers, ultimately for the purpose of retaining those customers long term. So I think that's a much more sustainable business model than having a leaky bucket where your sales team is working overtime and then there's just, on the other hand, customers leaking out. So I'm really excited to see customer success be outside of the tech industry and be a much more common way of doing business just across the world.
If that happens, do you think that that will change the way that everybody does customer success, like including tech people?
Will it change? It'll open up a lot more job opportunities.
I think that's true. I think that's true. Amazing. Emma, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I think it's so I love kind of getting into the weeds about like how people operate their customer success team. I think it's been very informative. So thanks so much for taking part of your Friday to chat.
Thank you.
Awesome.
How many of these interviews have you done so far, Paul?
That's a good question. I want to say maybe 40. maybe 30 or 40 is what I would say. This May I did 20, and then I can't remember how many I did in April. And April is when we started it. So 30 to 40 is kind of roughly where it's at. And I mean they've been really good, and it's been people mostly in tech. A few people in marketing agencies who, interestingly, like client services and client success is very similar to customer success. So I've learned a lot there. I talked to somebody not that long ago in the cannabis industry, which was like kind of interesting and also not quite tech. So kind of an interesting cross cut of people for sure.
Yeah, great. Where do you see this project going for you?
So for us, it's there's a couple of pieces to it. One is like, I've got a startup, so it's like posting this stuff is, I think it's useful, but it helps us like, create content to talk about customer success, which is valuable for us. Secondly, because we're a startup, we're always looking for crosscuts in terms of what are people thinking about, and that helps us inform kind of product direction for us, because we serve customer success teams. So if I were to hear 7 people say this is a problem and like I don't know what a good answer is, then I just take that to the engineering team. I go, oh, like here's something we should be thinking about. And I think that's been pretty good so far. But that's really it. And like, the third thing, of course, is I really like, I enjoy talking to people about being good at this job in particular. And so if we didn't have this business and I was just running a CS team, so right before this business, I ran CS for a machine learning company. And so if I was still doing that role, I would still like to have these conversations, because I think it's, smart people solving hard problems is like a interesting place to be.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some things that you hear often during these interviews, like whether it's challenges or, where people think the industry is going?
That's a great question. So, a lot of what I've been hearing about and talking about lately is, automation. People are really thinking about, how can I do more with the team that I've got? I maybe have 3 or 4 CSMs and we're growing. What can I take off of their plate that they don't want to do? Like, what busy work can we automate? What sort of things can we do to kind of like get ahead of churn? I've been talking about ChatGPT a lot with people recently. Of course, I feel like that's, like kind of top of everybody's mind. It's been interesting to see how opinions have changed about it between late February and today. Back in late February, early March, people were, the sense was, well, this thing's out there and maybe my job's at risk, and today people have had enough time to play with it. And that's not the sense anymore at all. Now it's like, oh yeah, like this thing helps me draft emails. This thing helps me, like figure out how I want to rephrase something to be a little more friendly, or, to be a little more stern sometimes. And so I think people are identifying it as a tool, and I think that's been interesting. And then, I think the last thing that I've really been hearing a lot about is just people really thinking about metrics a lot. Like what sort of things can we measure to help us understand the health of our customers and like what's at risk. So like predictive analytics has been coming up a lot. And like CSAT and NPS a little bit. I think maybe you mentioned this, like NPS is kind of a question mark for a lot of people because you've got the Amazon rating problem where it's like, well, I'm just going to say things are good because I don't want the person who I like to work with to get in trouble, even if it has nothing to do with the product. So I think that's been interesting, but it's been like, fairly broad, but those are the big themes that I would say I've seen so far.
Cool. Predictive analytics is definitely something on our mind as well. Are there any types of metrics that come up a lot in predictive analytics?
No, not yet. So most of the times when I've talked to people about predictive analytics, they say this is something I want to do. And it's rarely been, this is something that we're actively doing. So I did talk to, I can't remember what her name was. I talked to somebody last week who has implemented some predictive analytics stuff, and they've got a data engineer in-house who basically has some stuff built around all their customer usage, product usage. They've got pretty good measurement of all of the various features that get used, and they take that and look at churn and growth. So the people who use these features tend to grow. The people who either don't or use a different combination set of features are churning at a higher rate. And so they're using that to figure out, as part of like a scaled CS program, do we need more documentation? Do we need training? Do we need to make product changes, et cetera? They had she had the advantage of, I think, a pretty heavily used piece of software. So they had enough data to make that valuable. But I think, if you can like minority report it and like see churn before it happens, of course, that's pretty valuable.
Yeah, definitely. So the goal is to start tracking now so that we can eventually analyze it in the future.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, exactly. And so like once they're using Metabase, and I think they like dump everything in the segment, they've got it all instrumented, and I think they're using Metabase to kind of like pull stuff back out later and figure out like what's going on. I don't know if I haven't
we
looked
just
at
started
Metabase
using Metabase too.
Oh, did you? Okay, cool. So I
Yeah.
don't know like exactly how they're using it, but I know like that is the tooling that they're using to kind of extract some of that learning.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I always appreciate when people take the time out of a busy day to chat.
Thank you.
And yeah, cool. Again, thanks so much, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Paul. Have a nice
Take care, Emma.
weekend.
You too.
Bye.